Thank you. Thank you, Wesley, and welcome back, everyone, to the last session for today. And we're going to have 3 presenters today. And then I'm just going to do a brief intro, given the fact that you might have already read their biographies. So the session today will be in 3 parts. It will be first by Charlie Ely, who's from Leeds, based in the UK. And this is following the theme for today, which is the politics of intimacy, domestic and personal intimacies. And her paper is titled Digital Dance and Domesticity, the work of female East African choreographers in the time of COVID. Charlie is a PhD candidate at the University of Leeds, researching the work of contemporary choreographers making innovative dance theater in East Africa. Exploring personal histories, training and practices and aesthetics of choreographers in this emerging field, her research recognizes the, a difficult word, epistemological value of dance within the imperative to decolonize contemporary African art practices. Thank you for joining us today, Charlie. And then I'll also just do the same thing, just in terms of intros. She'll be followed by Dubazane, based in Cape Town, South Africa, and also Nomcebisi Moyikwa, based in South Africa, Durban. And their paper is titled, Language is a Breathable Space. The words must get out of the way for something else to come through. And there they're quoting Klonaris in 2011. So over to you, Charlie. And then once we get on with Mlondi and Nomcebisi, we'll just maybe precede that maybe with additional introductions. Thank you very much again for joining us today, and we're looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much for that introduction, David, and thank you everyone who's watching today. So I will share my slides with you now. Okay. So the East African dance world, its cultural troupes, the commercial sector, street and theatre dance are all dominated by men. Female choreographers are few and far between. Knowledge of this fact developed my interest in the work of the pioneering few with the under-researched field of contemporary dance. 8 months of embedded fieldwork would make up the core of my PhD research, beginning in July 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic has affected each and every one of us around the globe. The 2 most major impacts on my work were the uncertainty over when I might be able to travel and concern for the artists whose livelihoods and identities as performers were abruptly stalled. As I began reconfiguring my research and community to the online space, as dance-related events began moving online, the digital technology gap between myself, a scholar living in the global north, and the artists at the center of my inquiry became profoundly clear. I suddenly had this new access to dance performances, talks, and classes streaming from the African continent, whilst they struggled with technological costs and even a number of government-mandated internet shutdowns. Though, as Sheila Mbembe puts it, quote, COVID-19 does not respect national boundaries, end quote, it has reinforced such boundaries through nationally imposed travel restrictions. Ethiopian choreographer Meseret Yaga has seen the opening of her new dance school postponed beyond any reasonable expectation due to the increased difficulty of transporting materials across borders. Tanzania's Happiness Majiji was due to tour to France, Germany, and Spain. Uganda's Catherine Nakaweza, her French collaborator, was due to visit Uganda. And other residencies and festivals were cancelled before call-outs for participants were ever made. Considering alternative research methods, scholar Margaret Somerville, after Victor Turner, notes that there are extraordinary liminal times and circumstances in which, quote, our predictable and known ways of being in the world are brought under challenge, and when new subjectivities emerge simultaneously with new forms, end quote. The COVID-19 pandemic is surely such a time. Through an engagement with pandemic-provoked experimental dance, through a new intimacy with artists' lived realities, perhaps new subjectivities and knowledges might emerge. As a child in Kisumu, Western Kenya, Diana Gaia enthusiastically participated in local talent competitions, yet she had no formal dance training until the age of 24, when she joined Yawa Dance Company, a professional training and performance group. She has since combined this effective praxis with her particular passion for dance theatre, acquired through self-navigating the internet. A diverse range of international artists, including Akram Khan, UK, Ohad Naharin, Israel, Crystal Pites, Canada, and the Indigenous Australian group Bangarra Dance Theatre, have influenced the avant-garde nature of her aesthetic. Her solo dance theatre piece, Skin, 2017, was the first such work by a Kenyan woman. The 50-minute performance, which imagines a newly created woman exploring her physicality and environment, is daring in its use of the body. For the most part, Gaia eschews the imperative to dance virtuosically. Her character crawls, falls, tests out her limbs, swinging them like a puppet. She also brings in scatological humor, experimenting with performer-audience intimacy, challenging our expectations of female behavior. In 2018, whilst heavily pregnant, she created a radical work titled Fetus Movement, in which she aimed to embody both mother and unborn child. Most recently, she contributed choreography to Dance Into Space's Agwata, which won the Sana Theatre Award for Best Dance Theatre Production last year. Such work earns her place as one of the leading choreographers in Kenya today, yet she is yet to have much international recognition. To the scholarly observer, this situation seems to be informed by realities including her gender, socioeconomic background, and non-major metropolitan city location. So in response to the pandemic over the past year, Gaia has created and shared a number of low-res smartphone microfilms. I'm going to discuss 3 of them here: Quarantine, Mimi, which is the Kiswahili word for myself, and Zanomi, an invented word to which Gaia ascribes connotations of fear. So we'll play them to you now, and I just want to add a brief content notice that some of the scenes are quite graphic in their depiction of mental health struggles and a suicide. So thanks, Wesley, if you could play the film. Okay, let me just share the PowerPoint again. So, in quarantine, Gaia is preoccupied with cleaning, contamination, and the unseen, swatting something invisible in the air, washing herself and her clothes. Zanomi begins with her hands twisting over each other, reminiscent of our everyday, yet now reconceived and recontextualized hand-washing rituals. In both pieces, there's a strong sense of ferocity and neurosis in these gestures. With the hand washing, to some, it might evoke Lady Macbeth washing that imagined blood of her hands. The atmosphere of Zanomi then quickly becomes raw and intense. Gaia repeatedly slaps her hands against her head, her face, chest, and back. A young child briefly appears in the frame. The film then becomes very hard to watch as she places her neck through a chain. She becomes limp, then animated and agitated again. When she eventually frees herself, we hear the child cry desperately. I asked Gaia whether she was concerned that viewers would not respond well to this disturbing scene. She explained that the movement, quote, just came, it was improv, and that during this period, I have been through rough times, so the feeling, it just comes by itself, end quote. She is unconcerned about others' judgments and unabashed about the need for more open discussions of mental health in her community. A recent UN Women's study into the impact of COVID-19 reports that more than 60% of women in Ethiopia and Kenya are reporting mental and emotional stress. For Gaia, dance theatre is a way to, quote, express what others feel and what I feel so that I can pass something across that is not seen or heard, end quote. Her lockdown microfilms also evoke a post-colonial conception of social death, as we witness a Black African woman whose body is already considered marginal by the forces of global neoliberal capitalism, experiencing further, to borrow again from Mbebe, psychic damage and societal isolation from the community with which she shares her marginalized position. Her minimal use of space, her lack of muscular extension, they make abundantly clear the inability to move freely at such a time. Of course, this social death is highly relative, as more than most of her neighbors, Gaia the choreographer has participated in civil society, traveled and had cross-cultural experiences via the highly international contemporary art form that she practices. It's perhaps only in the third piece, Mimi, that the viewer can clearly identify Gaia as a dancer, as here her movements are less pedestrian and more graceful than in the others. Yet repetition, frustration, confusion remain. She shifts her position on a sofa, as if finding it impossible to become comfortable, to feel at home. She turns over a cushion with both hands, not knowing what to do with it. It has become strange. Homike Baba reminds us that the unhomely, after Freud's Unheimlich, is not only, quote, a paradigmatic colonial and post-colonial condition, end quote, but that through feminist analysis of the relationship between the domestic world and civil society, uncanny gender distinctions can be revealed. In particular, gender inequalities are brought to light when the barriers between public and private break down, phenomena which are emphatically relatable to the situation facing many of us during this pandemic, even in the privileged, ostensibly progressive UK. As the only film shot inside Gaia's home, Mimi allows the viewer to develop a deeper intimacy with the performer, yet at the same time, it might highlight distance for some, as we consider the relative comforts of our own surroundings. A sepia tone effectively evokes nostalgia, whilst also acting as a literal and figurative filter between us and the full color reality of the room. In the other pieces, an uncanny relationship between the viewer, the performer, and the female coded domestic space is also present. We see her in a courtyard, but we can't make out any background features, any exterior setting. All we're allowed to see is this confined area suspended in space and time. COVID-19 time, for the single mother whose income stream as a performer and teacher has dried up, is characterized by the uncanniness of home. We also understand this through Gaia's movement vocabulary, her corporeal embodiment of mental anguish that we do not like to associate with a space that we wish to be comforting and safe. I could also speak to the soundscape, which also reflects this atmosphere, I think. Here is in Baba's readings of post-colonial literature, quote, "The unhomely moment relates the traumatic ambivalences of a personal psychic history to the wider disjunctions of political existence," end quote. Gaia herself does not ascribe to a particular philosophy or a political stance. Despite this, her artistic imperative is to bring in new ideas and start conversations about socio-political injustices. As such, her creative methods of improvisation and responsivity to her environment are strategies which align with her worldview and with an understanding of the COVID-19 pandemic as a liminal time in which to try to play as one's subjectivity transforms. Celebrated Congolese choreographer Faustin Linyekula has spoken repeatedly about his use of improvisation as a response to challenging situations, which resonates with Gaia's lockdown work. As he explains, quote, "Improvisation at this point is not an aesthetic gimmick, but it is the only tool I have. It's a way of living. I live in a society, in a country where it's impossible to predict tomorrow," end quote. Now, as Gaia shared these films, I recognize both their artistic value and their inability to be selected for numerous film dance competitions and festivals on the basis of formal criteria that she was unable to meet. These criteria might include landscape framing, though portrait is the social media norm, a minimum resolution, seemingly creative requirements about working with the film medium that implicitly suggest certain financial resources and or the input of professional collaborators, and strong skills in either the English or French language, with application that forms asking for long paragraphs on what drives you as an artist or cultural practitioner, and how is this project innovative? How do you integrate the digital dimension, for example? It's no coincidence that Catherine Nakaweza has had the most international exposure of any female East African choreographer working today, when her considerable artistry is matched by eloquent writing, honed through a previous day job in copywriting. Diana Gaia has no access to a computer. And although she has a smartphone, its camera is not capable of shooting film in high definition. Incidentally, I was really delighted to see Jomba explicitly addressing this issue in its last week in its call out for Open Horizons 2021, which will accept short form submissions in low resolution. Gaia uses third-party phone applications such as InShot and Viva Video as a means of editing the footage together with sound, yet no respectable dance platform is likely to present works with such obvious branded watermarks over the footage. Even for those with high quality recording equipment, there's a further issue and expense of uploading such high MBs or even GBs of footage to the internet when you pay as you go for data. In short, the movement of live performance to the digital space presents major challenges for many African dance artists. However, gender inequalities mean that imposed technical, financial, and linguistic constraints all run the clear risk of excluding women from the conversation. Through considering the content and context of Diana Gaia's lockdown choreographic output, we can see how the home as a site of injustice, poor mental health, and unhomeliness for women has been exacerbated by the pandemic. In East Africa, menstrual, maternal, and child health are all areas of major concern. However, through creative improvisation in this liminal time, East African women can consider new possibilities of being, and we can draw attention to these issues. Yvette Hutchinson has recognized works by South African performance artists Chuma Sopatela and Mamela Nyamza as, quote, embodied feminist activism, end quote. Gaia's films, with their urgent attention to women's everyday realities, also own this label. I personally have enjoyed many visually stunning choreographed complex dance films from African performance makers over the last year or so, utilizing steady cameras, advanced editing techniques, shot in multiple locations, and with original scores. Yet I believe that when I look back, it will be work like Gaia's that foregrounds domestic intimacy and strangeness, and the individual experience of lockdown in raw definition that will remain with me as most emblematic of this in-between time. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much for that presentation, for your paper. What we'll do is I do have a couple of questions for you once we are in the Q&A mode, but thank you so much for that well thought through presentation, Charlie. And I'm not sure if Mlondi and Nomcebisi are in the room.
Hi.
Ah, finally, the Queen arrives.
Oh,
welcome. Yes. So just before you present your paper, I'm just going to, just for the purpose of people who might have just joined us now, just one line about your biographies. So Mlondi is an aspiring writer and performer engaged in the private and public slippages between intimacy, desire, playfulness, and violence that bedevil the navigation of relationships amongst Black men. And Nomcebisi is currently mother to Kayone. She's an artist, a drama and performance studies teacher at the University of KwaZulu-Natal based in Pietermaritzburg campus. Her interests are in death, composition, and possibilities. And she is so obsessed with Fred Moten's writing. And I'm really, really interested to hear what you've got to offer this afternoon. So similar to what we just did with Charlie, it would be you present, and then there'll be an opportunity for us to engage with you further on your presentation. I welcome you, and then you can go ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I believe we're going to start with the video that we want to share before we speak. because I'm not quite good at presentations, I feel they require for me to arrive with a certain kind of preparedness that I can't hold in my body. So what I've done to hold myself today, and I think what we've done is we shared the document on Google Docs, and we shared what we wanted to engage in. And so what we're going to do, both of us, we're going to read from that that we had shared in the moment of that feeling of preparedness and what it offered us. And I think then as we journey, it's going to make sense how we are engaging that in our practice, and how we're also engaging with the language itself. So I'm going to read. A friend of ours, Toby Ngubane, reminded me something. He wrote to me and said this to me. Sanbonani Nom, he sent me a flower image. I hope you are most alive in yourself. Sorry I haven't checked in. I've been having a bit of a difficult but also needed time with home. How are you doing with the chicken pox? I had chicken pox and I had told him. Got it from Kayone. Sorry I have not been sharing for Tina. I love the way you guys have structured the visual layout of the image and the website. It really is an experience, especially on a laptop. How are you, Unjani? Really? How are you, Unjani? Really, really, Unjani. I'm so grateful to love you and to be loved by you. I'm proud of you. I'm grateful for you. He sends me another text straight after. He says, I love your insistence on insisting. He sends me a laughing emoji. Since I met you, I responded, I love how you language my love for humanity. I left spaces and I said, wow, and I sent him a sun. Now I'm sharing this text because I'm grateful that he reminded me that this world we have together, the way we see each other, the way we hold each other, how we treat each other and how we talk to one another is possible because we insisted on each other. It's possible because of insistence. We came back and we keep coming back not to change things, but to hold each other differently, to even come in back to ask to be held. This coming back to insist, to remind, to return is a prayer, I think to myself, is umkhenso, I think to myself, is dance, I think to myself. I remember now, I come from that tradition. I come from emithandazweni, where in the morning my grandmother would be praying in her room, where we knew that after generations, even before generations at 7 p.m., my grandfather would switch off the TV and would come and pray, would come back to remember. Emixhentsweni at home, xa kukho umsebenzi, omama bangqishe. Ekhaya, the way we had amaplanga, wooden floor. So the wooden floor, when the feet would be stamping, would shake. That insistence, right? That makes the ground shake. So when I speak about dance, I'm continuing from that tradition that makes the earth tremble, right? I once thought I loved repetition in my speaking, in my choreographic life. I once mistaken this insistence as repetition and impact, because that was the language that was given to me in the studying for choreography. The thing of describing what is happening with the body, right? This insistence on engaging and relating to the body through this voyeuristic lens. So this insistence then allows for, I would think to myself, a resonance, right? a continue from the rhythm of the feet that spoke and uttered insistence on love. On a book by Fred Moten, as I said, that I love his work, he's written a book called The Undercommons. At the back of it, there's this quote that I thought it would be useful for me to use as a breather into my continuation. Today, the general world of social life finds itself confronted with mutations in the mechanisms of control. The proliferation of capitalist logics, governance by credit, and the management of pedagogy, right? And so this insistence, it removes us of that control, right? And then when I speak of intimacy, then as I think this conference or colloquial is asking us to engage, intimacy in this world that Fred Moten in the back of the book is talking about, the world of mechanisms of control, is inspired by a coming together and a closeness. That if we come together, right, something is going to happen. We become intimate, we become close. However, I can't possibly sit here and write, well, in this case, try to explain and talk to you and analyze how I've dealt with intimacy in my engagement with Mlondi in making of Ugida, which is what we were presenting in the video. I can't sit here and analyze it or speak about intimacy when that which is intimate for me is what is happening here, this gathering. For me and for us, this is intimate. This is romance, right? Us gathered here to remember and to remind ourselves, finding ways of returning only to return. That needs no analysis. It resonates and makes me aware of the places in my body that I was once not aware of. This that is happening here. I could only hope we could keep returning, and maybe the time we gather again, we would have remembered more of the places in our bodies. The deep, ancient places that Audre Lorde speaks about, the unrecorded emotions, the deep, deep, ancient places. May we come back and come back. Yesterday in the conversation between Dr. Lutz and Mr. Boyzitsakwana, but Mr. Boyzitsakwana was talking about the ... in his works, and that ... for me is that insistence, right? That we're not moving forward. We're insisting. And in part of the comments, there was a comment that that someone, I don't remember the name, someone called that insistence or that ... the labor of dance. I thought, remember, I'm continuing from the tradition of Mthandazo nokuxhenza. So the laboring is the coming back. It is the reminding. It is us coming back to touch ourselves differently. The laboring could be an insistence if we allow it to be. See, awkward, right? As Push reminds us, to get rid of the things that keeps us from connecting. Fred Moten speaks of when we have torn, I'm gonna curse, shit down, we will inevitably see more and see differently and feel a new sense of wanting and being and becoming. This is this coming back here in this colloquium, right? But of course, this requires an improvisation that proceeds from somewhere on the other side of an unasked question. We always know the questions of how, we are experiencing the world, the questions on how intimately in our bodies are we experiencing the world. Hence, we said, how does your body arrive at privacy? We ask those questions. And of course, those questions are gonna open an uncomprehensiveness in us. because then that is the place in which, we see more, the more we wait, right? And so for us, Mlondi, we engage in this, we keep gathering and keep coming back to each other. And so continue from the tradition of cleanse and umtandazo, it was useful for us then to find new concepts of thinking about our relating. And for us, the concept of ukukapana, that we accompany each other, right? Removes us from this voyeuristic way of engaging with each other. So then when we have to think about writing ourselves, right? We had to go, we are people working the body, have to write. So how do we then cancer on top of the writing, right? So that something else, another life can come out. So the spaces in between, if you have to go to remembering what Philip Nyobese reminded of, that the spaces in between become those spaces that where our ancestors come to be alive. The spaces in the language. Then we don't ask for meaning, right? Because the more we insist, the more we are remembered of our goodness and remembered of our way in which we can hold each other. So then when I speak of dance, I speak of that traditions of insistence. Mlondi, thank you.
Yes, I was just about to say that and remind the two of you that it's 20 minutes of presentation. I'm not sure how long you're going to be, Mlondi, so that there is also just some time for question and answers towards the end of the session. So if you can perhaps just keep it short so that we can engage with you, because I do see some interesting notes on the chat box, which I'd like to share as part of the Q&A. So over to you, Mlondi.
Sure, no problem. I'm going to read a passage also, or not a passage, I'm going to read a passage. I'm going to read something that I wrote today in conversation with Nomcebisi in the morning. And it began from a conversation that I had in our relation also, Nom, where she was saying that reminder is an important step to story. Then she went, no, reminder is an important step in story. In story, reminder is a step in story. So at this moment in time, I feel this nervousness that's in my throat. It feels like it's shifting up and down my neck. My teeth feel closer to my lips and my tongue is stuck to its floor. Is the first thing that I put down in the morning. Just this check-in of exactly where I am, emzimbeni wami, which is this insisting that we've been trying to find Nomcebisi in the writing and in the practice of the body, right? Is to go, where is Lomzimba? How is Lomzimba, right? And if I continue, I said, I remember, as Nomcebisi was saying, as I'm reminding myself, I remember that Mina and I, we began, or rather we continued by speaking of our unrecognized, but wanting to be recognized or voiced parts of ourselves. The ones that we were shutting down, the ones that we kept in place, and the ones that we've lost track of, and some we've built our frame from, right? This kind of idea of the ways in which we frame and self-portrait ourselves into this figure, right? And I remember feeling like I needed to challenge this premised version that I was holding too tightly onto. And I remember writing about how I was afraid of another reprimand. And the thing I've now gotten from that piece of writing was that there was a belief that I generated for myself in my body that speaks of not being enough or not having the ability to express truthfully and sincerely from where umzimba wami is. And shaped, these experiences that have shaped my ways of interaction. And more importantly, these are, and if they've shaped my interaction, they've shaped the way in which I relate, my ways of relating, my ways of entry, my ways of arriving, as all the questions, as we continue, there are questions that we are asking about ukungena kwethu in these things, privacy, the private space, the respect, and on, right? But then Nomcebisi told me, quite importantly, at a point in time, and as I try to wrap up or give myself some gift in this experience, Nomcebisi said to me that I need to distrust language, right? This breaking it apart and looking for the things that remain and are located in that breaking apart of the language that you have been holding so tightly onto, that has served, and probably not served, but has served this type of loathing that I had been feeling when Sonia speaks of the self-radical love that is journeying away from the self-loathe, right? The self-loathe being the place where we keep ourselves, I don't know, where I have kept myself comfortable, where I have kept myself in a specific belief, where I have kept myself in a certain place, where I have distanced myself. So this has then brought me, and as I'm here, ukuthi impilo zethu, impilo yami noNom, izimpilo zethu, this, the people that have shaped me, the echoes, the voices, the validations, the affirmations, these are the things that have been interested in keeping me alive. And that's the language with which I have been trying to find for myself, the one that is interested in seeing me alive and living and breathing. Thank you. Yeah. This is all a desire to get into contact with myself, not just physical touch, but also the way in which I set myself into motion, and the way in which we all set each other into motion, and to not forget about that, and to take that as a way to dance with our embodied experience and move with that place of knowing, Wuti, your words move me, shape me. That's the insistence, that's the cleanser, that's the prayer. Yeah, well.
Hello to everyone. Yes, thank you so much for such thought-provoking presentation. And I can see that Nomcebisi is totally overcome with emotion as a result of your sharing. It's a really honest feedback coming from both of you. And I just had one question for Charlie at the beginning, and then I'm going to read some of the comments because I think that they really contribute towards this discussion. So Charlie, my question was just in relation to the East African female choreographers. I just wanted to know, do you think that there has been movement in terms of how they are recognized as arts makers? Because generally speaking, when we talk about the presentation of dance, choreography, and performance, they're always on the margins of society when it comes to artistic expression. So my curiosity was just wanting to know, has that changed in your dealings with the three particular choreographers that you've been working with?
Thanks, David. That's a great question. I think there have been some shifts recently, and that the sort of demarginalization of women in the field is growing. Really, contemporary dance in East Africa is much more recent than in South Africa or other places on the continent. So we're talking about 25 years. Mm-hmm. But I would say it's really the last 10 years that it's moved from being sort of one isolated company or group in every East African country to feeling like there's a movement. So I'd say it's in the last 10 years. And I think that progress is being stalled by the pandemic. You know, that a lot of the dancers do have family duties that as women are a bit more time consuming. But there are some other great initiatives as well as the choreographers. So I want to mention in Tanzania, the Muda Africa School in Dar es Salaam. I think they're a fantastic school, and they've been taking about 10 students a year for a 3-year training program since 2013. Last year, they decided that their new cohort would all be women, and they get choreographic training as well as dance training. And while someone like Gaia is doing these very small pieces and, you know, finding this improvisatory way to continue, some of the other choreographers, Catherine Nakaweza and Lillian Nabagala, both in Kampala, they've been spending time this year working on bigger filmed dance pieces and really engaging with that. So I'm excited to see how those works will turn out when they're ready as well.
Fantastic. As everyone has said in previous sessions, we can spend the whole afternoon just dissecting and then talking about, in fact, the evolution of contemporary dance within the African context. Because yes, 25 years ago, if you were in the Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, there were a lot of strong female voices there, in fact, even today. And it's just interesting how all of this is emerging and then having these common yet distant conversations that bring us together. And then I suppose the digital divide has become almost like a place of unity where we're able to look at where we are in space in terms of technology and everything else in between, and then trying to navigate all of that. So thank you for that response. I'm just going to read some of the comments here, and you can respond at any point. And then this was directed to both Nomcebisi and Mlondi, where Tobile says, intimacy is as immediate, the here, the now. I love this recognition. So that's Tobile. And Charlie, yourself, you just said that you can relate to that. You can relate to that particular sentiment. And then Ayanda Kala says, we are not honest with ourselves about what matters to us and in which order. We judge ourselves instead. So we perform the script of who we are supposed to be and attract things to which we are being, which is not who we are. Oh, this is very deep English, but then I can see where it's all coming from. Let me just read the other. Yes, Kamuhelo says, it is interesting to see the process of journeying and re-journeying. That I quite like what you were saying earlier on, Nomcebisi, because this is like, you know, a continuous state. It never ever stops. We begin, and then the beginning is the end, and the end is actually in the middle. So this constant cycle of searching and researching, rejourneying, yes, beautiful. From the how to release the breath located in grounding oneself, and the sugar water to return to oneself after moments of trauma and shedding. Lovely. I'm not sure whether there are other people who would like to weigh in this conversation, because it's not about me, but then more in terms of gaining insight on what we've heard so far, which I found really, really profound. Thank you to the three of you for all of that. So Wesley, I'm not sure whether it would be a case of allowing people to speak or they can ask the questions in the chat box. Whichever way is going to be easier, I'm easy. Up to me. Nomcebisi, I was really, really interested to, just for you to elaborate more on, and then I do need to read that expression. the mechanisms of control, according to Fred Moten. If you can just speak more on that, because for me, I found it quite a fascinating expression. And then you spoke with it with so much passion. So I just wanted you to elaborate more on that and then share with us what it means to you, not necessarily what its meaning is, but then what it really, really means to you.
I think what it means for me is that is a refusal of that offer, right? The refusal of having to navigate from that control, right? And I speak of that I said on part of the thing that we're doing, being swanky with incomprehension, that this idea that you are, I think I don't know how to, I don't know how to say his name. He's a post-colonial, I think he writes on theater studies as well. He speaks about decoloniality as this thing of working from fragmentation, starting from fragmentation. And Nomalanga Mkhize speaks about not decoloniality, but this concept of ukufukuza, right? That uyarumba. So I think for me, that's then, it offers me that thing of not holding on into the control. And I think how we then think about for example, how we think about if we have to use ukugida umxhenso, or this idea of insistence that we get from umxhenso, then we are able to find other ways of engaging ourselves, or of engaging how we relate. For example, in performance, we always think about collaboration. Me and Mlondi, in engaging in this insistence, we found that ukukapana, accompanying each other, goes in the place of collaboration. Because collaboration, again, there is a sense of coming in that we don't have the same desire, which is the same desire is to live fully and, in this life, right? So the accompanying, like if, for example, Uma or Mama in the church, when they would have a song that accompanies them, right? That does not only inspires the kind of intellectual realm of the person you're journeying with, but inspires the spiritual, the emotional, so there's something useful in engaging that. For me, we found in this process.
Absolutely. And then just a comment, it's not even a question from Londi. What I just found fascinating with your interaction with Nomcebisi is the way that you've collaborated, as you put it, has been on an equal basis. It hasn't been like, based on gender to say that, okay, no, this is how I'm coming in. And then for me, it's one of the essences of African dance. If you look at that, like, generally speaking, and it's not within a South African, East African, or North African, that is all about equality. It's all about being heard. It's all about a sense of unity and commonality. And I must commend you. I mean, like, it's not praise, but then it's just an observation that for me, if these kind of collaborations and interactions happen even more so, it just brings equality to how we see art, to how we create art, that ultimately it's about how we make meaning in this very, very difficult world, and using the arts as a means of expression to say that here we are, and yeah, we make meaning, and ensuring that we're able to thrive and survive in this, as I say, very, very difficult world. Charlie, I'm not sure whether you've got any final thoughts that you'd like to say or share with us. And I am wishing you well in your journey, because I can see that it's been difficult. I'm like, COVID has been really, really nasty and unkind. But then also at the same time, it's taught us a lot, that maybe it's time to be quiet, time to breathe. But then in doing all of this, and how do we then recreate and re-journey this difficult journey, so to speak? So I don't know whether you've got any comments.
Yeah, thank you, David. I'd like to say two things. the first is in response to what you said about the journey and COVID and so on. And when this all happened last year, I felt very strongly that I didn't want my research to become COVID research, that I didn't want it to be like a thesis about the pandemic, but
Absolutely.
I knew that I'm writing on work that is meant to be happening now and live, so how can I get around it? And I think whilst artists might have been doing stuff last year, for me, it took about a year since it started to sort of have reflection and feel like I can start to explore these works. So yeah, it's been a really good part of the journey for me to sort of take stock of it now. And the other thing I wanted to say was at the end, Mlondi, you, in talking about writing, you said finding the language that keeps you alive. And I thought that was a really beautiful phrase, and that it also it encapsulates what Gaia was trying to do, you know, not making a work for a festival or for anything else, but, you know, moving in her own language that was going to get her through this year. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for that contribution. And then we're nearing the time towards the end of the session. Any last words, in fact, from the three of you, briefly speaking, and then I just want to reiterate, I'm really, really grateful that I'm sharing this space with you. That, as I say, internet or all of this is bringing us together in a very strange way, but I'm grateful for this opportunity. Nomcebisi, any famous last words? Mlondi, Charlie?
As I said in my talk, that I can only hope that we can come back, do the work of insisting. And thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Yes, we can only continue. This is the beginning. Mlondi.
For me, is is, you know, there's a couple of things that I want to do, but I'm also like, now I'm feeling awkward about doing them. this is what's happening at the moment. Okay, first of all, just because of my desire to also continue, it's an actual desire, not just for myself, but for this intimacy, this gathering, right? Is that Nomcebisi, we've started we have a page called @4Tina, FO_Tina, THINA. And I have no marketing sell point to tell you of what that is going to become, but it is happening, and it is already happening. And we would also really enjoy logo kapana that I think everything that we are finding in our long relationship that we've had with each other is to come also saying that this is also our desire for the kind of place with which we are at, not just for Tina Pen, right? And that's where it comes into, say, 14, where we can also come sihlangane, and organize and plan and move forward to whatever we decide and whatever we dream.
Fantastic.
So FO_THINA.
Yeah, no, we will follow you, and then you will see what you're up to. And don't lose us in the journey. Oh, there it is. Excellent. For Tina. Charlie, your last opportunity to say something very, very profound before we...
just thank you. It's really been a pleasure to participate in the dialogues this year, and I really hope that at some point I'll make it to South Africa. And
absolutely, and you are welcome.
Yeah, continue conversations in a different kind of intimate way.
Excellent. Thank you so much. On that note, I would like to thank the three of you again and all the people behind the scenes for making it possible. Wesley, Claire, Ms. Lutsiwe, and everyone else involved. Thank you so much. I mean, these are very, very important conversations that we're having right now. I've been listening with a lot of interest for the past, yesterday and today, and also what has happened in the past, where whenever there are these Zoom sessions, one tends to get distracted because, like, it's talk about talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. But then what I found really, really profound and meaningful was the fact that with a lot of us, we've been so silent in the way that we express ourselves, not only on stage, but then now is this opportunity of really, really articulating ourselves where we're able to speak to the world in general. And for me, this has been so clear. And so it's been a gift, in short, just listening to fellow arts practitioners and where we at while we're thinking about the future of art and the creation thereof. Thank you so much to the three of you. And Wesley, that's my cue now to say goodbye. And for all the people who have been part of this session listening in, we thank you for your attention. And we will see each other tomorrow. I'm hoping that you will join us for the last day of this important dialogue that we're having. Thank you so much.